How's it going? Kevin Clear here with The View from the Pew, and I want to talk a little bit about a current trend that is a little troubling and quite pervasive among churches in sort of our time. And I'm going to share a little experience with you that I've had recently a couple of times. It seems that sometimes today churches are dominated by a particular age group, okay? And so I've walked into churches recently where it seems like, I don't know, there's like 2 people over the age of 50 in this congregation, and everyone else is of a younger crowd. Then on the other hand, I've walked into churches where it seems like everyone is over 50 and there's very few of a younger crowd. And the frustrating thing about that is that what has generally happened is that congregation has made a conscious choice to lean more toward traditional type of worship or more contemporary type of worship, and then that is reflected in the demographics. And it can be a combination of both, right? It can be a combination of a younger group advocating for a more contemporary service. It can be an older group advocating for a more traditional. Often, though, what happens is one group kind of comes to dominate the tone and the culture of a particular congregation, and that is the practice that I think is a little unhealthy, where one demographic kind of takes over and runs everything. The other side of this whole equation is the trend toward contemporary service, where we're going to have 2 services, one traditional, one contemporary. And here's why I think that's a little problematic. You know, I know most churches look at it as, hey, this is a solution to a problem we have where, we're kind of having a hard time balancing these 2 groups. And so they say, hey, let's just give them both what they want, and we'll do one contemporary, one traditional. Now, I want to qualify this video very carefully by saying this. I'm not talking about churches where part of the group wants to change a practice, okay? Where, you've got a part of the group that wants to add an instrument or have women in leadership or something else like that. Those things are matters of faith. Those things are matters of what does the Bible say about this, and we need to do that, okay? Now, when it comes to what I'm talking about, it's not that one group is doing something unscriptural, that one group is doing something that's not consistent with the revealed word in the New Testament, okay? Both groups would be completely in line with worship according to God. It's just that there's a different tone, the songs are a little different, the overall atmosphere is a little bit different, okay? And here's what I want to say about some of the choices we make along those lines, okay? First, when we decide to have 2 services, when we decide to have like a contemporary and a traditional service, I think that reflects some problems, some unhealthy thinking in the congregation, okay? I would like to ask, what does that say about the willingness of this group of people to work together? What does that say about their mutual care for one another? Okay, what does it say about their willingness to compromise and to come to a consensus on matters of opinion? Okay, and so I think those are really troubling questions. I think the fact that a congregation has said, we're not willing to figure this out and work together and do something that reflects all of the congregation. Instead, we're just going to separate and do our own thing. Okay, I don't think that in general is a healthy approach. And I think, when Paul says that even favoring one preacher over another in 1 Corinthians 1 is problematic, that instead you should be of the same mind and of the same judgment. Or when Jesus says that you should be one as he and the Father are one, I don't think that's reflected in, hey, let's have 2 different worship services because we just can't compromise and we just can't agree on one worship service together. Okay? And so that's one of the main problems I see with it. There's another problem that may be even bigger, and that is how that kind of practice, and in fact, and even the other option where congregations tend to favor traditional or contemporary one over the other, I would ask, what does that say about this particular congregation's ideas about worship? Okay, what are they thinking they're doing when they come together on Sunday morning or Wednesday evening or other times where they engage in worship and praise to God? What are they thinking about that? Because what I think is suggested by we're going to have a contemporary service or a traditional service, I think what is reflected in that is people saying, hey, when I come to church, I want to hear songs that I like. I want to do things that make me feel comfortable. I want to do things that I find enjoyable and favorable. And that tells me right away that this group is approaching worship with a wrong motivation. Worship is not about me and what makes me happy. It's about what glorifies God. Okay? And here's the thing. When we come to worship to glorify God, what ends up happening, the side effects of that, the derivatives of that, are we end up with a worship service that is refreshing, that is encouraging, that builds us up, that makes us feel encouraged and confident about going out and living this week with and for God. However, when we come with our own agenda to be pleased and entertained and made to feel something ourselves and not to glorify God, we don't end up getting any of the things that we came for, because all those things that we came for are actually side effects, are extras that come along with worship that glorifies God. And so we've ended up giving up both because we've made it selfish. And so a congregation that breaks into two separate groups is implicitly buying into the idea that worship is about me. That we should do in worship what makes me happy, what I like, and what I find enjoyable. And I think that's a problem. And so I think this is reflective of an overall trend among Christianity, among churches, where we're not very good at balancing the generational gap that exists. All of us have to face this reality. Every church, in every time, will have to deal with the fact that the younger generation can often think differently and act differently, enjoy different things than the older generation. Okay? That's just a reality of life. Anyone who has grandparents, any grandparent who has grandchildren, knows that that's true. Even as you age in your generation, it was the generation after me that was sort of interested in like Pokemon and so the Japanese anime stuff. I think that stuff is so stupid. I can't take it. We have Netflix and sometimes Joel will pick one of those shows. I cannot tolerate it for more than 5 minutes. And it's not because those are necessarily bad shows. It's because my generation grew up with a different kind of cartoon. Okay? And so I'm conditioned a certain way. Power Rangers drive me crazy. I cannot deal with Power Rangers. Now, I'm bringing those sort of superficial things up to say my preferences are biased by my age. And I've got to be very careful that I don't insist on age-derived biases in worship, because it's not fair to other ages. Because when you come to worship, there's a huge span that's represented. In the congregation here in Meaford, we have people in their 90s, and we have we have kids that aren't even out of their first year. Okay? Worship has to be beyond. It has to be above age-specific preferences. Okay? And the way we do that is by all coming together with one purpose, which is to glorify God. And then, when we all have that same purpose, we're here to glorify God, then we can say, hey, that song, even though it's a little newer, and maybe the lyrics are repetitive, or maybe the tune is simpler than what I'm used to, maybe there's less diversity in language, maybe it's not as poetic and as artistic as some of the older hymns, it still glorifies God. And maybe if I'm a younger person, that song is to a slower tempo than I like, and maybe it has too many words to remember, and I can't sing it without a songbook, and I don't like that. But I also have to admit that it glorifies God. Maybe that prayer that's a little longer and has more these and thous in it sounds odd to my contemporary ears. And maybe that prayer that addresses God in a slightly more casual way, that talks to him as if in a conversation, feels odd to an older person who is more formal. Both, again, glorify God. Sermon illustrations that have to do with how computers work instead of how agricultural practices work. Are going to... So the reality is we're going to have that diversity in a worship setting, and we need to be patient with it, people. We need to be understanding, and we need to include all of that, okay? It's not fair to leave certain people out and favor certain people over others in either direction. What we need to seek is balance, and what we need to do is work together, love one another, and come together to worship in a way that glorifies God first, and then maybe reflects some certain elements that certain aspects of the congregation prefer. Okay? So, I know I've said more than I wanted to say already about this. I hope this helps, and I hope this offers some perspective and encourages all of us as Christians to worship in a way and live in a way that glorifies God rather than ourselves. And that's the view from the pew.